All right, so we'll move on to three very interesting presentations involving business, toxic AI, and games and how they work together. So our first talk will be by Taylor Hardwick on children and in-game spending. And just for a warning, we have all free to take photos, social media for all the presentations in this session. So get your camera out, take a photo if you'd like, and I'll leave it to Taylor to get going.
That mic is on. Hello. Hello. Is that good? Yeah, cool. Hi. Hi. I'm Taylor. I finished my PhD recently. Hold for applause. Okay, if they say that, you've got to applaud. While we're doing this, I'll just acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which I live, work, and play a lot of games, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. And today I'll be chatting about a study conducted by myself, Marcus Carter at the University of Sydney, and Dr. Stephanie Harkin at RMIT, which is part of Marcus's Future Fellowship project on how kids are monetized by the digital games industry. So children are frequently at the center of debates around digital gameplay and indeed digital media more broadly. And these debates tend to pathologize children's play by focusing on narratives around addiction, screen time, violence, and if you want any nuance on that, please seek out Ben Nicol in the break. And in recent years, there's been growing concern around how games are monetized and how this might impact children, with particular global regulatory focus on loot boxes. And if you want more information on that, please see Tianyi in the break. But these concerns fall into those same pathologizing traps, right? So thinking about children shouldn't be gambling and children are overspending. And these conversations tend to focus on and perhaps exacerbate parental anxieties around their children's digital play, but they very rarely foreground children's voices themselves. So today I'm going to be chatting about some of our findings from our interviews with kids and their parents. And in particular, I'll be discussing how children articulate value pertaining to their in-game purchases and how this differs from parents' perceptions of in-game purchases. So in the games that kids play, the dominant model is free-to-play, and free-to-play games have long raised concerns around dark patterns, which are patterns intentionally used by game creators to result in a negative experience for players. And so all of this has a lot of focus on gambling mechanics or random reward mechanisms, which I will clumsily and reluctantly refer to as RRMs. Loot boxes are an example of these, but they're not the only possible RRM. And Mills et al.'s research argues that these mechanics are emotionally and financially harmful to children, but they also demonstrate that kids place great value on the items that they receive through these gambling-style mechanics, and that these purchases are becoming increasingly vital to children's social and play cultures. So in this research, we're trying to move beyond takes like gambling is bad, and trying to understand how game monetization forms part of contemporary childhoods, and therefore how parents and children can be better supported in navigating in-game spending. So Steph and I conducted 22 semi-structured interviews in the home with children aged 7 to 14 and 18 of their parents across 16 families. And these interviews were complemented by 2 additional methods. So we used gaming interviews where kids would show us their digital play and proudly show off their digital in-game collections. And we also gave child participants a $20 voucher to spend however they liked, bit of fun. And this facilitated think aloud data as children deliberated in situ through their spending habits and decision making around spending. It also made them like us a lot, which is important to me. So we asked kids the top 2 games that they were playing most at the time. And thank you, Heather. I'm getting Discord notifications and I like my slides too. And as you can see, most kids were playing Roblox, right? Fortnite is a distant second with 7 children playing it regularly. And the top 4 games listed here are all free to play. So they offer in-game purchases as a key part of the gameplay, but they're not required to purchase the game. And only 4 of the 22 children spent their $20 voucher In the interview itself, most opted to think about what they wanted to purchase more carefully, or they were saving up for something really big and cool. 4 children purchased something, a non-digital item with at least some of their $20, and 1 child spent their whole $20 on lollies at Coles, which is frankly iconic. And of those who made a purchase in a game, they usually first had to convert their voucher into a virtual currency, Robux or V-Bucks, Roblox, Fortnite, respectively. And the majority of purchases made with that virtual currency were then made on microtransactions, particularly cosmetic items, avatar accessories, skins, functional items, and so on. And most of these purchases were made in Roblox or in Roblox games. And so children gave us a lot of reasons for why they might spend or why they've made previous purchases. So I'll run through some of those. And so the first big thing that came up was these purchases form part of kids' social cultures and their identity development. So for some kids, when they make in-game purchases, it's super important to them that they can hang out with their mates and fit in as well. And this particularly came up when talking about subscription models, Battle, VIP, Game Passes, particularly Fortnite season Battle Passes. And Carter et al. Have published on how Fortnite is a rich social space for kids, and the season Battle Pass is a particular vehicle for that. And some popular Roblox games offer game passes as well, and kids respond similarly. My friend's playing this game. I can only access this game if I spend $16.99. Mum, can I have the battle pass? Some kids also spoke about purchasing cosmetic items or avatars because they were popular or because their friends had them. But these choices weren't socially motivated all of the time. So avatar skins and accessories were articulated as a form of self-expression, where kids are able to demonstrate their identities and form their identities and agency through their in-game avatar. And they've developed rituals around scrolling the marketplace, watching YouTubers, chatting to their mates, and then selecting their items through that they want to buy, or as one child put it, I see what looks cool, and then they buy it. And though these digital items form part of kids' identity expression, the children we spoke to were often influenced by the media cultures that they engage in as well, particularly YouTube gaming content and popular culture. And this was most evidenced perhaps by the slew of children that I happened to interview right after the Marvel Fortnite Season Battle Pass released, and every single one of them was so proud about their totally unique new Gwenpool avatar. She's great, so good for them. But something that came up in interviews more than I expected was, because I'm old, is children actively engaging in these media cultures themselves via content creation for YouTube and TikTok. And then they make their purchases accordingly, right? So, Jesus. So for one instance, one child was trying to become a Roblox avatar fashion influencer on YouTube, and it was really important to her that she had all of the best stuff, right? So these purchases were not only informed by media cultures, they're also sometimes an aspirational effort to engage in media cultures as well. And of course, kids wanted to buy stuff that improved their gameplay experience. So occasionally children spoke about paying to progress in a game, but this was pretty widely derided by the children we spoke to, who thought that was cheating, to pay to win, and they, in their words, preferred to work for it. So of course, Roblox's whole billion-dollar business model is contingent on the unpaid labour of children, and if you want more nuance on that, you can chat to me later. But some people, yep, that's all I have to say about that. Functional items and access to in-game features is another prominent reason that kids wanted to make in-game purchases, and they'd say that they make the game more fun and interesting. So through all of this, we learned that kids are really discerning, actually, when it comes to assessing value and making purchases, and they'd talk about this using language like, is it worth it? Maybe it's not worth it. And they said this in a few different contexts. So when items were overpriced, they felt like it wasn't a good deal, or they didn't trust the mechanic, particularly referring to RRMs here. They'd use language like scams, and one kid said that it is a total cash grab. They also spoke about purchases not being worth it if they felt regret about the purchase in the past. So they didn't get what they expected to buy, or they felt like they'd outgrown it, or it simply wasn't trendy anymore. And age was reflective here. So older kids we spoke to tended to prioritise their in real life hobbies, spending time with friends and family, rather than investing money and time in games. So parents' attitudes toward gameplay was generally pretty positive. You know, they spoke about liking the creative, educational and social benefits. They hated the screen time, blah, blah, blah. But they tended pretty negative toward in-game spending. And the attitudes here reflected their parenting values and also their own game experience. So some parents leveled the blame at game developers directly for what they perceived to be manipulating their children into spending money, using language like villains and unethical to describe them. And one parent, when talking about how she feels that the game is deliberately asking her child to spend money, explained, "I do think it's a real con. I think they've really got them over a barrel." So this intensely negative perception of developers aligns with those addiction and gambling popular discourses. But I found it really interesting that children sometimes articulated these same views around evil developers, which suggests that this narrative is shaping those family discussions. Parents also talked about in-game spending leading to conflict. They hated it when their kids nagged them. Their kids would get frustrated when they were told no, and this would lead to arguments. But in interviews, parents would often then kind of, confide in us that they felt anxious about their parenting and their parenting skills, or feeling like they just have to give up with the argument. They have no more energy for it. Parents also frequently place significantly less value on digital items than physical ones. They use language like "it's not real" and "there's really nothing to show for it" to describe their kids' digital purchases. And one parent lamented that her eldest daughter would not be able to hand me down her Roblox avatar purchases to her younger sister. So this in turn exacerbates family conflict, right? Because kids feel like their parents aren't taking the thing they care about seriously. But it's also compounded by socioeconomic status, right? So one parent who was speaking about the family's financial insecurity told me that she doesn't know how she feels about microtransactions, but she does know that it all adds up. So some of the parents we spoke to did see the value in in-game spending as a teaching opportunity for their children. So families are using in-game spending to teach their children how to save, using their virtual wallet as a digital wallet, saving for a big purchase, about risk when engaging in RRMs, and using regret about their past purchases to motivate careful spending decisions in the future. And also some parents appreciated all of this as a way to practice healthy communication about big topics in the future, like alcohol and sex. So to kind of summarize, parental anxieties are valid. If you're a parent in the audience and you feel like shit right now, don't worry, you're okay. But across the board, parents feel underinformed and overwhelmed by in-game spending and navigating their child's spending. And at the same time, parents often accepted that this is simply what being a kid is like these days. They just wish they had more support. Children are capable media actors, right? The kids are okay. And this is something that's often forgotten in moments of panic around children's digital well-being, but they also need support and they need safer environments in which to practice learning about money concepts. So understanding all of this and exactly what it is that parents and children value when it comes to in-game spending could help families navigate these practices better. It could also help regulators and policymakers make more nuanced and informed decisions rather than just banning shit willy-nilly. And it could also help developers make games which are less harmful to children, and we're talking about that in more detail in a forthcoming Kai paper. But thank you so much.
All right, next we'll have Ren Galwey here to talk about AI and the potential role of it being an upstander. So quite interesting to hear.
Can you all hear me? Very good. Hi, I'm Ren. I use they, them pronouns. I'm here to present on behalf of the AI Ally project, and we are presenting on co-designing AI tools for inclusive online environments. Is it this one? Or this one? Or this one? There we go. I would first like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm presenting today, the Kaurna people, and pay my respect to elders past and present. Just a content warning as well. This kind of presentation will discuss some themes of harassment and that kind of stuff. So if you do need to step out, just do anything you need to make yourself feel safe at any time. That's fine. Let's get into it. So, as many of you will know, online spaces are rife with toxicity. It's a huge, huge issue. In Australia, over 65% of young girls and women in particular have been subject to online harassment. And I have no doubt that that number is actually much, much larger. So unfortunately for many, harassment has become just a normal everyday part of existing online and is taken as such. But it doesn't have to be this way. Sorry. How do I go back? That one? Okay. Fortunately, Australia is one of the few countries in the world with a regulatory body dedicated to tackling online harms. Through the powers granted by the Online Safety Act, the eSafety Commissioner has the authority to enforce compliance with major technology companies if they're not looking after Australians and their well-being, which is fantastic. Hands up if you've heard of the eSafety Commissioner in this room. Most of you, good. When I presented for a law thing last year, the number was much less, so hopefully I've had something to do with that. Great. So the Commissioner's research shows that Australians feel underprepared in handling instances of abuse, and they want better resources and better support. And so that's kind of what we're here to do. So first of all, in this context, we started with the game project, which is specific to game contexts. And we wanted to examine how communication in multiplayer games was regulated. So as online spaces increasingly move from human automated hybrid systems to strictly AI-driven moderation, we observed that there was a really clear disconnect between the industry practices and the players' experiences of those systems. Through the use of metaphor, which is a very powerful linguistic tool to reveal underlying attitudes and beliefs, we found players consistently viewed AI moderation as punitive. So they would use metaphors like police officer or judge, really kind of nasty stuff. Through co-design workshops with players, we explored alternative metaphors that AI moderation might inhabit. These were things like nurturer, teacher, gardener, just to name a few, which is really interesting. Among these AI roles, we had the word upstander come up, which is someone who actively supports and advocates for players or people online. And this emerged as a really particularly promising one to address online toxicity. And this is how the AI Ally project was kind of born. So we are funded by the eSafety's Preventing, it's a big title, Preventing Tech-Based Abuse of Women's Grants Program. The project focus is to create an online tool to help particularly girls, young women and gender diverse individuals aged 14 to 25 and to understand how AI might be able to assist them in managing harassment online, especially in the capacity of an upstander. So through this, given that existing reporting systems are falling really short, we're prioritizing a co-design methodology to actually work with the users who would be the end users of this product so that we're designing something that will actually suit their needs. Our main research activity was a survey that received over 230 responses from girls, young women and gender diverse individuals across Australia regarding their harassment experiences. The survey asked about platforms used, harassment frequency, and specific instances of harassment, providing rich insights into how online harassment occurs and where AI could, or maybe should, provide support. Findings from this survey are directly informing the design of the AI tool to help us identify the most challenging or pressing needs of users to make sure that those are addressed. So let me share some key insights. Whilst 44% of respondents frequently experienced gendered harassment, what's particularly troubling here was the context. None of this was happening in some dark corner of the internet. It was happening in everyday online activities, posting photos, posting comments, that kind of thing, which is really distressing. By their early 20s, 3 out of 4 users have experienced harassment from strangers online. But perhaps most concerning was that this harassment often did come from within their own social circles. So 1 in 4 teenagers, so this is the younger end of the spectrum, reported being harassed by school peers, and 13% of teenagers reported harassment from their ex-partners. I'm just going to let that sink in. These findings show how online harassment is deeply intertwined with real-world relationships and power dynamics, fundamentally shaping how young people engage with these digital spaces and how they are able to present themselves and live in these online spaces, which are alternate worlds. So one thing that really struck us was how many participants didn't really want to report to the platforms. Instead, they would take matters into their own hands. So nearly 3/4 chose to directly block their harassers. Over half chose to ignore the harassment entirely and to do nothing about it. And only 1/3 of victims chose to actually report to the platforms. And this really low rate actually stayed consistent across age groups, so it didn't get higher as they matured. This resignation to harassment as just being a normal part of online life is exactly what we need to challenge and change, ideally. When it came to their their barriers to intervening, be it on behalf of themselves or for other people, they said that most of them told us they were worried about their own safety. They were worried that they would become the next target, which is fair enough. Even when people wanted to help, they really weren't sure the best way to go about it. They felt underprepared, undereducated, and they thought that they might actually make things worse, which is kind of sad. These fears of retaliation and uncertainty are really powerful barriers that keep potential allies silent. So our initial findings actually challenged what we thought users might want from an AI tool, which was really interesting finding in itself. And illustrates that co-design in this kind of space is really important for that exact reason, so that we didn't just charge ahead to make something no one wanted or needed. So we initially assumed that users might want AI to directly intervene or to stand up to diffuse situations, but they actually told us that that's not what they wanted. They wanted things that were more practical and more empowering. So they wanted functions to help them document the harassment when it happens, to help them navigate the complex reporting on the platforms, but also to put them in contact with legitimate support systems such as eSafety as well. So to really make it clear and feel helped and supported and guided through that process. This insight was pretty transformative. It shows that they didn't want AI to be their defender or their censor or their moderator, all of those existing roles. They wanted it to be their ally. AI ally, yeah. And so they wanted it to be able to empower them to take action on their behalf and on the behalves of others. So one of the most valuable and troubling, honestly, aspects of the survey was the really rich qualitative data that we got. We had people just telling us their stories of harassment and what had happened to them or people they knew online. It was a lot to read through and very, very troubling. But it allowed us to build really detailed user personas that kind of canvassed what harassment looks like online today for these people. And through this, we've got these kinds of personas. So from Liv, who's a Twitch streamer, navigating this kind of targeted, coordinated harassment, to Sam, who's a journalist facing privacy violations, to Priya, who's just a young student trying to exist online. Aren't we all, right? So with this, each persona kind of represented a different background, ability, needs, literacy, and we were able to pass that on to our wonderful, wonderful dev team, who then used that to inform the dashboard features that we would actually build for, to make sure it was responding to users who might actually use it in the end, right? So the insights from our research are actively shaping how we're building AI Ally. Instead of creating just another punitive moderation system, no shade, but all the shade, we're developing a dashboard that prioritizes practical, user-driven tools for documenting and reporting harassment. We're currently conducting internal and external testing of this dashboard. And then in the coming months, very exciting, we're going to be collaborating with Girl Geek Academy on a hackathon in which we will be bringing in experts and kind of young people together to work on the next iteration of AI Ally. So really ramping up that co-design process for the future of the project. Whilst AI Ally's scope extends beyond gaming, our findings have particularly significant implications for game communities, where harassment often begins before it spreads to these other platforms. And that was one thing we could see in the survey results, was that it was often inter-platform harassment that was occurring that made it really hard to manage and to know how to deal with. So the integration of AI in gaming spaces is really accelerating, and the traditional focus on automated punishment just isn't working, this automated moderation systems. We really need a fundamental shift towards supportive, community-led solutions. And I think co-design is that solution. So this is especially critical as we see, as everyone here has pretty much alluded to, the increasing regulation of spaces where young people are. Game developers, policymakers, and platforms are at a really crucial junction, essentially. They can either continue down this path of purely automated moderation, as things are, or they can embrace a more nuanced, user-centered, and actually address, community needs. And our research points to how clearly the latter is preferred. AI can be reimagined as a tool for empowerment rather than just a lackey for enforcement. As we conclude today, I want to emphasize that the challenges of online harassment, whilst they feel vast and insurmountable and overwhelming, our research shows there's real potential for actual positive change. By listening to users, by embracing co-design, and by using our vast imaginations and metaphors, we can actually make this online space create digital environments that are safer and more inclusive for everyone. Thank you.
Very insightful presentation. So next we have Tim Holland here to talk about automated moderation. And I'll let him take it away when slides are all good.
Hi everyone, my name's Tim. I'm a Masters of Computer Science student at the University of Melbourne. And today I'm going to be talking about my master's thesis project, which is looking at the use of explainable AI to generate different sorts of explanations for moderation decisions within multiplayer games, kind of with the objective of improving perceptions of fairness within these systems. It's very much a work in progress at the moment. So today I'll be talking about the motivation for the study, the specific research aims, the experimental design, and touch on the expected contributions. So to begin, I'll start by stating something which we all already know, and that's toxicity is a pervasive issue within online spaces. More formally, it's known as a form of dark participation, which is deviant behavior online, and it's specifically any action that results in harm to another person's health or well-being. As a result, it's very much contextually defined between communities and varies in form from fleeting verbal interactions like trash talking to more egregious outcomes like harassment or hate speech. Now, moderation are the formal governance mechanisms that are put in place by a community to structure participation in a way that is intended to prevent this abuse. Typically takes the form of reporting tools utilised by human moderators, people within the community to flag other individuals, and increasingly algorithms through general purpose filtering tools. And it results in things like warnings, content restrictions, and account bans or suspensions. Now, the prevalence of toxicity points to the fact that, well, moderation isn't really working in practice. And this can be kind of understood cyclically. Where on the one hand, moderation is deemed as being ineffective by targeted players or very difficult to use, resulting in its underutilization, which Ren touched on in the previous presentation. And on the other hand, it's deemed as opaque and unfair by offending players, resulting in a lack of reform on their behalf. And the automation of these systems is very much exacerbating this cycle. And the directive of my research is more on the latter half, improving transparency within these systems so that they can be perceived as being more fair. Now, we can kind of understand why they're perceived as being opaque if we just look at a couple of notifications that players receive in practice. In GDA Online, a player is informed that they're suspended with no further information or just a link to the community guidelines. In Call of Duty, and players informed that of the type of offence that they've caused, with again not much further information. And then with League of Legends, we probably have the best of current practices, where there's a description of community standards, and the decision is actually explained and justified by referencing the chat log that was found to be toxic. Now, some recent research has kind of motivated our own research aims, and that's specifically, well, moderated players do act in good faith sometimes, going online in community forums like Reddit to understand why they were moderated and how they can change their behavior. And secondly, those moderation systems that do provide explanations, like League of Legends, are perceived as being more fair and actually increase the likelihood that offenders will understand how to modify their behavior in the future. Which kind of brings us to our two general research aims, which is to consider, well, how else could moderation explanations be designed? And do these different explanations improve perceptions of fairness within these systems? We've chosen to constrain ourselves to automated moderation because that's the way the industry is heading, and also to only consider toxic chat and not consider like toxic behaviors like cheating. And to design these explanations, we very much lent heavily into explainable AI, which is all about developing automated systems that provide reasons or give justifications for why they're making decisions in the way that they are. And to help me kind of explain what this looks like in practice, I've got this silly image of a dog playing a guitar, wearing people's clothing. And you can kind of understand here that this image classifier has a sense of understanding of different concepts. So it gets it right in terms of explaining a Labrador by highlighting the pixels around the dog's face. But it kind of gets it wrong when it comes to the guitars. For electric guitar, it only focuses on the neck, whereas for acoustic guitar, it only focuses on the bass, meaning that it's not quite there yet in how we would want it to categorize things. So to go about structuring different forms of explanations, there's been some recent movement within the explainable AI literature towards considering the interaction of explanations. And so accordingly, we're considering our different notifications as being composed of two variables. First, an explanation type, which is the means by which a decision is justified, and then an interaction style, which is the mode by which this explanation is actually delivered to users. I'll quickly run through briefly the different levels for each variable. So for explanation type, the first one is referential, and this is the status quo. It's kind of what we saw with the League of Legends example, whereby the decision is justified by referencing the chat log that was found to be toxic. For the second level, which is a feature-based explanation, we go another step further, and the system highlights the specific words that were found to be toxic and then contributed to the classification, which gives the users an indication that the system is behaving in a way that it ought to, like with the pixels on the dog before. And then thirdly, we've got a counterfactual, which is where decisions justified by contrasting the toxic chat log with the chat log edited to be non-toxic, essentially telling users or showing users how they could have spoken instead. This might seem a bit odd, but counterfactuals are seen as being an ideal within the literature because they provide users with actionable information. But in this kind of non-cooperative context of moderation, that might not be the case. And then for interaction style, we've again got three levels. Firstly, the status quo, where the explanation is provided to users and there's no further information or interaction. Secondly, we've got an explorative level, where the explanation, where the system is opened up to users. They're able to test out different inputs and see how the system classifies or explains them. And then thirdly, we've got a conversive interaction style, which is where a chatbot essentially dynamically responds to user queries about the moderation. And that's facilitated by providing that chatbot with information about the given moderation decision. And so altogether, the two variables, 3 levels each, we've got 9 notifications that we're going to be examining in practice. We're very much in the middle of prototyping this at the moment. So I've got some examples of some mock-ups that we're doing, which kind of give a flavor of each level and each variable. And because this is a presentation and it's kind of public-facing, I've included a rather sanitized and unrealistic example of toxicity in the form of the word idiot being a toxic word. But, just use your imagination. And so on the left, we've got a counterfactual and static notification where the user's informed, the chat log is referenced as toxic, and they're told, well, you could have spoken like this and you wouldn't have been flagged. The second one is referential and explorative, where the user is invited to test out some different inputs and see how the system would respond to it, so they get a better understanding of how it actually works. And then thirdly, we've got the feature-based explanation and a conversive interaction style, where the user can ask questions and the chatbot essentially tailors the explanation based off of which specific words were found to be toxic. Now, we're going to be testing these different notifications in an online experiment held on the behavioural research platform Prolific, and participants will be adult players in multiplayer games. They'll be introduced to the experiment as testing out different moderation systems for a hypothetical game. And there's kind of two reasons why we've chosen this hypothetical setting. And that's first of all because we want to include players from different games in our sample. And secondly, we don't want players with preconceived ideas about moderation systems that they're used to coming to the table in the given experiment. Each participant will experience every notification, and they're all going to be applied to the same general case of toxicity, which will just be a form of offensive language. And then after each notification, they'll just self-report across some scales we've drawn from the organisational justice literature, which are meant to define fairness, and also answer a few open-ended questions. To analyse the data, it'll be pretty straightforward. We'll use repeated measures of ANOVA for the quantitative stuff. And then for any qualitative data, which includes answers to the questions, but also interactions with the system itself, we'll use a template analysis, and that'll bring to life our qualitative data a bit more, or quantitative data a bit more. And at the conclusion of the study, which is hopefully going to be in the middle of the year, I expect to have kind of two contributions. First of all, we'll have an understanding of the importance of interaction in contexts where a user is receiving a decision from an algorithmic decision-making system. And that could be having a loan application rejected, or it could be content moderation. And secondly, and more fundamentally, we'll have an understanding of the importance of different types of explanations within automated moderation systems. And this is all about increasing transparency, giving users more information, essentially trusting users a bit more, with the hope that we can kind of create more inclusive and healthier online communities. They're my references, and thanks for listening, everyone.
All right, so I'll invite the other presenters Ayla and Ren, and we'll go through some Q&A. So I'll have my friend here, Billy, to pass around the mic for any questions. But first, I'd like to ask Ren a question about your how would you say, what is it, design?
Co-design?
Yeah, that's it, yeah. And how have you found that journey? Because I myself have been through a co-design journey, and I would just like to ask you about how is it going? Yeah.
It's changed a lot. It's changed a lot based on the cohorts that we're working with. We're obviously approaching this with like a trauma-informed framework. All our staff on the team have done training, and then the way that we've approached the co-design processes has to change because of the sensitive nature of what we're looking into. But I think all of those being maybe perceived barriers to another project are kind of the reasons that it has to be this way. It's difficult, but you get such a stronger sense of what's actually needed as a result, instead of just powering through and building something that no one actually needs, or that is going to further this existing template of how moderation is meant to look. Yeah, so I think it's been difficult but worthwhile. Yeah.
Already. Hello. Here you go.
This is a question for, is it Tim? Sorry, my eyesight's not too good.
It is.
So do you think for the method where it's like showing the people what is a better version of the of what they could have said, do you think this could be used by like toxic community groups to adopt the terms, giving them like a harsher meaning, like how like 4chan has often like taken words and made them harsher to avoid that kind of censorship?
Yes, I definitely think that is a possibility. And we kind of know that players will kind of game any system that you give them. So that's kind of part of having some qualitative data in there to understand whether players are thinking in that mindset of being like, well, we're going to use this kind of non-moderated word and that'll become toxic in its meaning. So yeah, we want to explore that, but for the moment, we're kind of seeing just what they generally think of it. Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Izzy. Oh, lovely. Hello. What's your name?
Oh, yeah, thanks. I'm Ben Nicol from QT. Question for Taylor, great paper, and Steph, I guess, as well. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah. So my question is about the stuff around risk management that you talked about at the end, where you were sort of, I think, saying that like risk management is maybe a value that both parents and children might share. But my thought was, don't you think risk management is addiction discourse today, in that like addiction discourse today doesn't just function by stigmatizing addiction as like a moral failing, but it functions more by making us think of addiction as like something to be managed according to a risk calculus, like, you know, enjoy a bit, but don't enjoy so much that you'll kill yourself, like drink responsibly, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I don't know, is that a good value? It just sort of sounds like biopolitics to me. So I'm wondering if that's a value we should endorse, I guess.
Just so I understand, yeah, I guess my kind of thinking around that was parents are using these like gambling style mechanics to kind of instill like a risk management, like a capacity to manage and assess risks. I don't know that
I guess I'm just I guess I'm questioning whether it's a positive value.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I will also admit that I've never read Lacan, and I won't.
It's not
so I
Lacan.
can't
I'm not
engage
talking
in
about
this in a
Lacan.
philosophical capacity. That was
This is
just
biopolitics.
well.
Like,
See,
yeah.
now I'm telling on myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think a lot of the parents were like, you know, young Timmy comes over and is sorry, Tim, and is like, Dad, I didn't get the rare thing that I wanted. And then Dad sits down and says, look, sometimes we don't get the things we want,
Yeah, sure.
and we take a chance on that. And yes, I don't know if it's positive or negative. I just know that families are engaging in
Yeah, it's okay.
that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's not very satisfactory.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Another question? Okay. What's your name? What's your question? It's on. Thanks all. Brendan Keogh, QT as well. I guess this is for the two automation ones. I guess it's going to sound like maybe an antagonistic provocation, but I'm just genuinely keen on just your thoughts on this. I suppose like the main role of like automation under capitalism is to just make labor cheaper, right? You don't have to hire people if you can automate something. And then when you think of digital platforms, meta, games as well, there's like been the long running, like we can't possibly afford to hire enough people to moderate all this stuff, right? Like that's kind of like, and it's the same with like Gen AI kind of systems as well. Like, well, if we had to make sure all the data it's trained on was legally obtained IP, then this just simply wouldn't work. So, oh well. So I guess the provocation, I'm again genuinely interested in your answer to this. How much by like making sure these like automated moderation systems are better, we're just helping software and games companies not spend money on labor to properly moderate their own platforms?
Yeah, good question. I think it's a very fair critique. There is also the consideration that human moderators are exposed to toxic things, and well, that actually harms their own mental well-being. So there is a positive in the sense of automating these tools. Of course, it needs to be done responsibly and ideally with co-design, as the AI Ally project is doing. But yeah, I think it is an issue, but it should be an iterative process, which is engaging with the community and developing from there, not kind of shoved to the side a bit. Yeah. Do you want to speak to that?
I have a lot of thoughts, especially coming from the law background that I do, on like so much of that, because yeah, the way that they are able to then develop those systems and the IP and all, you know, that whole side of it is so interesting. And it does feel like a can of worms that's, you know, already so far gone. And so it is just, it's really difficult. And I think that's why the thing I love about the AI Ally project is it's not about the systems itself, it's about the effects of the system or the lack thereof, and helping users after the fact, which companies aren't interested in doing. So that's definitely a gap to be filled. So I think similar with your project, is about the literacy in understanding why decisions are made and having that explainable side, which I still think can still be separate from the somewhat commercial values there. That's, yeah.
Brilliant. Any more questions? Oh, one over here.
Like so far.
Hi, this is a question for Taylor. I just wanted to ask you, what was the age group for the kids that you worked with for the interviews? Were there any other differences other than the older kids tend to prioritize like in-game purchases in order to like just be able to spend more time outside of the game? And also, how old was the kid that spent it on Cole's lollies?
She was 10 and she's my favorite person. So the age range was 7 to 14, though I don't know that we interviewed any 14-year-olds. So I guess 7 to 13. The youngest was 7. And your second question was?
Were there any other differences between the ages? Yeah, other than the, yeah. Yep.
No, I don't think so. We interviewed significantly more boys than girls and one non-binary kid, and I don't really recall any significant differences across. Steph is shaking her head, which means I'm correct. Across that, that like I don't think girls that we interviewed were necessarily more interested in buying, for example, cosmetic items as opposed to like functional items or anything along like gender lines or anything like that. So no, I think mostly age is what came out, where older kids were, they were playing heaps of soccer. They didn't have time to spend money in Fortnite. Or one kid was like building a bike, so he was like, I want to buy a bike part, and he was 13. So I think it was just as they started to develop these rich social lives and interests outside of games, that started to reflect in their spending as well.
Thanks for the question. We'll do 2 more. What's your name? What's your question?
My question's for Taylor again. Did you find that parents correlated in-game spending to things like other toys like they grew up with, or like Pokemon cards or collectibles in general, and that helped make connections if they did?
Yeah, so every dad that I spoke to, I know I was like, there was nothing along gender lines. Every dad was like, oh, it's just like footy cards, isn't it? And yeah, it is just like footy cards in a way. Yeah, parents did talk about, their experiences in their past. They'd say, oh, I had a Nintendo. We didn't have any of this online stuff, and would reflect on their childhoods themselves. But most parents we interviewed didn't have extensive gameplay experience themselves. So in terms of the purchases, I think clothes was mentioned more. A lot of examples that I heard were around like, I can understand my child wanting to buy a cool pair of shoes that everyone has, but I don't understand him wanting to buy this Fortnite skin. So yeah, I guess they were thinking about things functionally rather than in terms of play and entertainment. Yeah.
This one kind of feeds off the other question, the previous question, and it is also directed to Taylor. Do you think that the generational difference between parents, I don't know if the parents interviewed were young or older or etc. I was wondering if the older parents did have like sort of a generational difference or opinion on the kids and what their spending habits were.
We didn't ask the parents' ages because that is impolite, maybe.
Oh, yeah. No, I completely understand.
There was like quite a broad range of parents, some really young parents and some older folks as well. And look, I don't think other than the usual, like back in my day stuff, I don't know that generational differences could necessarily be attributed to their attitudes. I would say gameplay experience first and foremost, and then their personal values and parenting values, which could be ascribed based on generational attributes. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys.
All right, well, there we go. I would like to thank all of our speakers again and give them another round of applause. I do believe it is lunchtime, so feel free to go and get yourself some lunch, and we'll be back here at 1:30 or so.